Hello, neighbor. This is David Gornoski. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice. We're coming to you across Central Florida, Tampa Bay, all the way over to Orlando and the Space Coast. Email me, david@aneighborschoice.com, if you have a story suggestion or a guest recommendation. That's david@aneighborschoice.com. And we've heard from some fantastic guests today. Earlier, we heard from investigative journalist Alec Klein about why people get convicted of wrongfully convicted of sentences for things they didn't do. And we also heard in this hour from Florida State Representative Anthony Sabatini, who worked pro bono to defend a man who was jailed for running his business, Curbside Pickup, for games, trying to give people a little bit of fun, trying to give people a little bit of something to divert their minds from the stress. Had to go to jail for that until Sabatini stepped in and the local government backed down. And so now Galen Wood, the individual who was arrested, owner of Kitchen Table Games, is able to be free and run his business unharassed. All these things have an underlying theme, an underlying current, which is, why do human beings hurt other human beings? What makes human beings do violent things to people who are not harming them? I mean, we can understand the natural retaliation that if someone's walking along and someone just hits them, there's a desire to fight or flight, right? You either fly out of there and run as fast as you can, or you fight. But what makes human beings create these little rituals through their fancy decorum, through use of law, to put human beings into violent animal cages who weren't doing anything to harm anybody else? We heard earlier this week from Rufus Rochelle, who spent 32 years in prison for a small amount of cocaine. 32 years. That's 1 year older than me, your host, that I've been alive. So this gentleman is the nicest guy you ever hear from. He was serving his neighbors while in prison by helping people with Katrina relief, getting them, coordinating with people on the outside to get fundraising for folks in need in Katrina's hurricane, the Katrina hurricane. He didn't let bars, man's cages, stop him from doing what he felt was God's mission, which is to love his neighbor as himself. But because of him being involved in the wrong crowd when he was younger, he got 32 years of his God-given life marred. And he still turned that negative thing into a positive, blessing lots of prison guards and fellow prisoners along his time in 32 years. Can you imagine how many people are bitter right now because they've had to spend a couple months in their home more? And they should be bitter in a lot of ways, right? I mean, there's a reason to be if you're being confined because your business is deemed arbitrarily to be not essential, or your parks that you paid for with your money, you can't walk on them. All those things are now starting to lift up, but there's reasons to be frustrated. But imagine spending 31 years for selling a few grams of a drug that we know many governments use for clandestine efforts. That's documented. Go watch the movie Kill the Messenger to learn about one of the journalists Gary Webb, who investigated and showed that the CIA was moving crack cocaine into L.A. to one Ricky Ross, Freeway Ricky Ross. He's out now, and he talks about his story. Moving crack cocaine into L.A. to help fund the revolutionary activities down across the world. So how can the same government that we give our consent to pump kilos and tons of cocaine into the system and then take 32 years of a man's life away because he sold some of that same drug they did? Now, I'm not saying you should sell drugs, obviously, and I'm not saying you should do drugs. You shouldn't do them. But why are entities getting people hooked on drugs and then using those same entities to throw people away for decades when they keep doing the same thing? Why are you letting this happen in your own name? Government is based on the will of the people, right? Government is based on social contract, right? Why are you okay? Or maybe you're not. I'm just saying this in general. Why are we okay with this kind of thing being done on behalf of us by our public servants? We know alcohol is a problem. We know that alcohol leads to sometimes people becoming addicted. We know it can lead to comorbidities and chronic illnesses, which can then clog up our healthcare system when there's a time of pandemic and you need hospital beds. We know that alcohol can also be associated with violence. But we saw how much extra violence and chaos and murder and awfulness happened when we tried to use government to ban alcohol. We saw what happens when you preemptively try to stop something that may lead to future problems down the road, and you try to stop it through violence. It creates way more violence, way more murder, way more addictive substances. That's where moonshine and a lot of very highly addictive forms of alcohol started to rise, was during alcohol prohibition. And so too, dirty drugs like crack cocaine and meth and things that are more addictive and smaller to carry have come up as a result of a failed war on drugs that criminalizes supply without getting rid of demand. So it creates a violent black market with massive obscene profit margins for those who sell it. That's what creates the violence. That's what creates the cycle of poverty so many cities have been afflicted with. But it all comes back to that same question I asked before. Why do human beings feel the need to physically hurt other people that aren't touching them, not messing with them? Why do they think it's okay to vote for politicians to do things to their neighbors that they themselves wouldn't do themselves? Most people wouldn't go up to their neighbor who's rich and say, "You have to pay for our new community charity or else I'm going to take it from you by force. Here's my weapons to do it." They would say, "That's awful. How could I ever do that?" And they wouldn't do it if there was a crowd of their neighbors with them, probably. They would feel still, they wouldn't want to participate in that kind of mob, going up to a rich neighbor and saying, "You're going to pay up because we need a new playground. And you've got more money than we do." But somehow you can get behind a voting booth, pull the curtain, and no one sees you. And then you can do a dirty little deed. You can do that same exact thing in some kind of magical ritual, and magically it's not violent anymore. Magically it's okay because everybody else did it, and they did it in secret. Nobody knows who voted for who, right? You're not allowed to take a photo of the ballot. And you do your dirty little deed, then you wash your hands and you say, if it goes wrong, oh, the politicians are to blame or the police are to blame. Nobody but us, huh? I don't think that's going to work that way anymore. We're becoming more and more aware of the sausage making of politics. And that sausage making is up to you and I. The public is what gives the consent to these kind of actions to be done on our behalf. So it's time to withdraw consent from things that you find wrong. If it's wrong for you to do it, it's wrong for you to vote for someone else to do it on your behalf. I'm David Gornoski. Godspeed.